Meeting Nelson Mandela, that was spiritual, that was overwhelming. It was just breathtaking. Did Daniel Arap Moi put you in jail for that? I told him the Karura story. And he asked whether I had been detained for it. Because those were the times that some of those stories can end you up in detention. I told him, no, I was never detained. When one of my teachers was chased by a wild pig that had kids towards the school, it was such a moment because we cheered. And I think that wild pig should be thanked because it's one of the things that led to the construction of toilets, because teachers now found it dangerous to go to the bush.
Congratulations for your admission to the bar. How has the experience been so far?
Thank you very much, and the experience so far has been overwhelming, from both internally and externally. And internally, I mean about how you feel, and externally about how friends, relatives, and a majority of people that I don't know actually have reacted to this. It's been overwhelming. I really appreciate the comments that I've seen all over the place. The messages I've received directly on my phone calls. It's been extremely supportive, and I want to appreciate everyone for the gesture of friendship, the goodwill that they've extended to me on this milestone of becoming an advocate of the High Court of Kenya.
Okay. What inspired you to follow this path?
Law has always been in the back of my mind, and it started long ago. In fact, at secondary school, where you choose careers to join university, Bachelor of Laws was my first selection. As fate would have it, that's not what I did initially. Journalism was always another passion that I had, that also developed in school and developed at home when I was growing up. And so for me, when an opportunity to study journalism came first, I went for it. But back in my mind, I still told myself, one day I should do this. And I remember in secondary school, when I was a student in secondary school, in Kilgoris Secondary School, one of the stories that I used to follow in the school library, the only place that had newspapers, was the commission of inquiry into the death of former Foreign Affairs Minister John Robert Ouko, who was killed. His body was found mutilated near his farm in Koru, Kisumu. And there was this commission of inquiry that was chaired by former Chief Justice Ivan Gisheru. And it sat in Kisumu. And it was a very, very engaging commission of inquiry. I remember Daily Nation used to report verbatim, and I've never forgotten the name of the reporter, Caleb Atemi. The reporters actually, not reporter, there was Caleb Atemi. I remember there was Njeri Rugene, these are people I later now met in journalism and said, oh, you are the ones who are reporting the commission of inquiry. So I would read these verbatim reports on Daily Nation, and I found them very, very engaging to see how the lawyers at the time were engaging. I always remember there was the assisting counsels. There was Moses Wetangula, who was a completely different person that time, I mean, in the inquiry compared to the politician. There was Okioko Mbaka, the late, very, very sharp minds that were engaging in this commission of inquiry. I followed that and I found that very, very interesting. Now, before that, there was also another interesting case. A clash between culture and the law, modernity and modern law and traditional African laws. And that is in the case of a lawyer called S.M. Otieno, that is Sylvanus Milea Otieno, who was married to a lady called Mary Wamboi. Mary Wamboi Otieno was a very strong woman, strong-willed, and when the husband died, she wanted to bury the husband in her matrimonial home in Upper Matasia, not far from here, by the way. Matasia is just not too far from my home here. And she wanted to get Esther Motieno buried there. Now, ethnically, Mary Wamboi is Kikuyu, and the late Esther Motieno was Luo. So what this occasioned was a very interesting clash between the Kikuyu culture and the Luo culture, traditional African cultures, and the modern law. Because modern law gives, modern English law gives priority to the spouse. So it is Mary Otieno really that should have decided where she should be buried. So this ended up in court as a very, very interesting case that is still a precedent-setting case to date. So the court at the time had 3 judges. If I could remember, I think there was Justice Bosire and there was Justice Akilano Akiwumi. I should remember the third judge. But what I remember also is reading the clash between the advocates. The advocate for SM Otieno Ugmira Kager clan was called Richard Otieno Kwach, who later became a judge. The advocate for Mary Wamboi was called John Haminwa. John Haminwa, you know, the oldest, one of the oldest practicing lawyers in town today. So it was a battle between Richard Otieno Kwach and John Haminwa on the other side. It was a beautiful clash. And by beautiful, I mean in a legal sense. It was brutal, it was rough. And I followed that. And those cases really inspired me. And I said, law is actually good. Law is about letting reason and process win. You really have to argue your point and let it make sense, not just to yourself, but to a bench of 3 judges, for example, in the case of the SM Otieno case, or in the case of the Commission of Inquiry of the late Robert Ouko. And I found that inspiring, that, reason taken to another level, to a place where it's the best argument that can win. And not just the best argument, but also the best argument as tied to the written law. And in the case of SM Otieno, Richard Otieno Kwach beat John Haminwa and won the case. And SM Otieno is buried in a place called Nyalgunga. And Nyalgunga is the place he was born. And I remember the court actually ruled that as per African traditional values, a man is buried where their umbilical cord is buried. So where you're born is where you're likely to be buried. And that was the principle in the case of SM Otieno. So those 2 cases caught my attention as a young person studying in secondary school. And remember, television was not what it is today. So these cases you follow in print, in writing. So I was reading this in newspapers, both the Daily Nation and the Standard newspaper, the 2 dominant papers of those times. I think the media has really grown, and the media has benefited from the growth of technology, because technology has made everything quick. When I started out as a reporter, live broadcasting was almost restricted only to the studio, or national events where you can now drive the OB van to the location, set up for days, and then book satellite parameters. Very complex. What has technology done? It has made everything instant. I'm imagining if the SM Otieno case happened in this television age, what it would have looked like is what the greatest political show in this country looks like today, and that is the presidential election petition, where we see from the pre-trial stage when judges and the advocates meet to set the rules for the trial or for the hearing of the petition. So it would have been an amazing story if SM Otieno and the commission of inquiry into the death of Ouko happened now. You know, it will be instant. You know, you watch it on television. So media has benefited and grown from the age of technology. Yeah. The connection between childhood dreams and what you eventually become is real. Nothing happens in vacuum. You don't just become. You have to have thought about it. You have to have envisioned it. You have to have seen it somewhere. And I say this because that I sit today here as an advocate of the High Court and a journalist. These are both things that I saw in my childhood. I want to take you back a bit to my journalism journey and what inspired it. What inspired it is really listening to radio. My dad had a radio that was sacred in how it's treated. It's opened only during news hours. So I would pay attention during news bulletins, especially in the evening, because daytime you're obviously not around because you're either the grazing fields as a herds boy or you're in school when school was in session. So I would pay attention to the news that was being read. My father listened to BBC via shortwave. And BBC those days had only half an hour window between 6:30 to 7. So I would make sure I've either locked up the goats and sheep so that I can dash to close to his where he's seated to follow the BBC news. Because those times, in the 80s that is, BBC was the only source of independent news about Kenya. Because there was only one broadcaster called the Voice of Kenya that later became the Kenya Broadcasting Corporation. And there, every news is about the president, and the signature was Mtukufu Rais Daniel Toroitich Arap Moi. Leo alienda kanisani. Alishiriki katika ibada katika kanisa la, it was famously one of the AICs. It's either in Kabarak or occasionally out of town. He liked AIC Machakos or AIC Milimani here in Nairobi. So you won't get anything about anything else. But then you go to BBC in the 90s and 80s, 90s, and they'll tell you about the activities in East Africa that you could not hear elsewhere. This inspired me a lot. So news was a bit, can I call it, almost clandestine to hear anything, especially anti-government. So for me, I'd go listen to the radio as my father was tuning in, and I would hear things like Dr. Mukaru Nganga has been exiled or is somewhere in exile, or Ngugi wa Thiong'o is in exile, Raila Odinga is in exile or has been arrested. And then in the 90s, especially the year itself, 1990, I caught up with the news about the arrest of Kenneth Matiba, Charles Rubia, and others that were arrested in crackdown against proponents of multi-party politics. So these are some of the things, just listening to that radio. Now, when I listened to this, I said, who is that was there when it happened? I would like to be that person, because that person is a witness to history. And that is what inspired me to start listening, move towards journalism. Something else that happened in our family, my parents, because I grew up in a very remote area, were the ones that were housing teachers that were coming to our school, Osinoni Primary School. My parents had a 3-bedroom house. 2 out of this 3 bedrooms were left to teachers. Teachers who come in, So they would stay in these 2 bedrooms. Sometimes 2 teachers in 1 bedroom, sometimes it's one each. So in my compound, we had at least 2 teachers at any given time. The one I remember the most is called Samuel Gashui Kimotho, who came from Nyeri. And Samuel Gashui Kimotho will always buy newspapers on Mondays and Thursdays. Those 2 days were market days. So they'd go to Kilgoris and come back with newspapers. Similarly to my dad, he would buy Taifa Leo, because my dad could only read Swahili. And I'll explain how he learned that. And so I would go to get those newspapers and read them. And as a primary school student, I became very, very good with news, current affairs, history. I would list all the presidents, names of all the presidents around the world, whether it's Siaka Stevens in these years as president of Sierra Leone, or Hastings Kamuzu Banda as long-serving president of Malawi. Those days it was Kenneth Kaunda in Zambia. Those days it was Mikhail Gorbachev serving as the last leader of the Soviet Union. And I would know all these things just by reading the newspapers that were brought by my teachers and the Taifa Leo that was bought by my father. So those are the people that shaped my interest in journalism. And there's only one curiosity that I wanted to fulfill. Who is that was there when that incident was happening? I would like to be that person. Later on in life, I learned that person is called a journalist. Journalists are the witnesses of history. When it's happening, they'll be the first ones to be there. Whether it's war, whether it's peace, like a press conference, whether it's an event like Madaraka Day or independence coverage, the first person likely to be witnessing that event is called a journalist. And I really wanted to become that person. And you know what? I did become that person. Yeah.
At your Thanksgiving party, you mentioned that your parents never went to school. Looking at what you've achieved today as their son, I'm sure they must be proud of you.
They are. And I'm proud of them. I'm more proud of them than anything else. Because I can't quite understand how they did this. That you can be from a background that completely has no education. And first you self-educate in your own ways. And secondly, you now pursue the education of your children. But thirdly, my parents did not just educate us. They decided to be the pioneers of education in our community where they lived. The first place Osinoni Primary School started was in the sitting room of my parents' grass-thatched house. I wasn't there, but I know the story. That it was not even a big house. It was grass-thatched, half cut into 2 halves, where there's a bedroom, there's a kitchen, and a large space that was called a sitting room. A few weeks ago, I was in Osinoni, and one of the students, one of the old men that actually sat in that sitting room, gave me the whole story. And this is Mr. William Lereikan Conchela, who was one of the students in that, pupils in that sitting room. He told me how they would sit there, and then they were taught all the lessons every day. And then when they were hungry, they could sneak into my mother's kitchen and see what she's cooking. It's an amazing story to see them not just pursuing their own improvement, but that of the community. So Osinoni Primary School, where I was born, the first classes started in my parents' grass-thatched house. So their story really inspires me. When I think of them, I work even harder. And they tell us, they never gave us the option of not doing well in school. And even though they could not quite interpret the marks, what you get and all that, they'll just ask you, how did you do? Your number? Okay. do well next time. Do well next time. They're not modern parents that can actually go and look at the report form and understand, because they can't even analyze the report form. But their spirit is that of go and do well, embrace education, it's a good thing. And their story really inspires me, and I'm proud of them.
Today you have kids of your own. Is there similarities between how you were raised and how you're raising them?
You know, I'm smiling because your question has reminded me of a humorous moment I had. I took my children, Lenkai and Emmy. I took them to visit my primary school, and we went round, and I was giving them the story of how it used to be. And the story of how it used to be is we grew up in a remote area teeming with wild animals. Their days will not be able to access the school until it's reported to the Kenya Wildlife Service in Kilgoris to come and clear the school of animals. The most common animals at the time were buffaloes. You know, you'll see the pitch is full of buffaloes. They are grazing. So of course they are wild, and it's dangerous to go to school at that time. And we'll have to wait for the chief to report to Kenya Wildlife Service, bring officers, they'll come, shoot in the air and drive away the wildlife so that we can access the school. So I gave my kids this story. I showed them the field. Of course, they couldn't quite relate. And my son asked me, how could your parents take you to such a dangerous school? And I said, this is a completely different generation, because they grow in different times. They are dropped in school either by a home car or by the school bus. This is a completely different generation, which did not see the difficulties of those times that we experienced. So life in primary school was not easy. It wasn't easy for us as pupils, but especially it wasn't easy for the teachers that were coming in. Because I'll tell you this, the community had not produced any teacher of its own. So most teachers were posted from other places. I remember my school was like a collage of the communities of Kenya. We had a teacher called Samuel Gashui Kimodo from Nyeri. We had James Mugo from Nyandarua. We had Kariuki Joffrey, who came from Kiambu. Lawrence Mungai from Kikuyu. We had James Awange from Migori. Who else do I remember? Onuonga from Kisii. Peter Sonomboga from Kisii. You see, one common thing about that name is all these names are, none of them are Maasai. I grew in a primary school where we didn't have Maasai teachers yet, which is why I think you may have seen it in one of my kickers that I am a big proponent of delocalization. Let teachers come from all over the place, because I think I'm a product of the teachers that were non-Maasai, because they gave us a different worldview. In a way, the world that we have not been exposed to were brought to us by these teachers who are traveling in. But back to the difficulties they faced. They didn't know how to interact with animals. And it was humorous sometimes. It was dangerous sometimes. When one of my teachers was chased by a wild pig that had kids towards the school, it was such a moment because we cheered. We didn't like the teacher. He was one of those harsh teachers. Yeah, and so a wild pig chased him. He had gone for a short call because we don't have toilets. So one side of the bush was for teachers, one side was for... Yes. We didn't have pit latrines. It was normal for a long time until pit latrines started happening. And I think that wild pig should be thanked, because it's one of the things that led to the construction of toilets, because teachers now found it dangerous to go to the bush. But for us, the locals, we knew, you know, first of all, a wild pig should not chase anybody. A wild pig it's not a dangerous animal. You should only be chased by a lion or a leopard, some serious animal. So we cheered the wild pig that day because we were happy that James Awange, our teacher, was being... we're like, yeah, that's justice for the teacher who beats us the most. But for now, I want to apologize for that, for cheering that wild pig. That is the kind of school that we grew up in. It's obviously something that our kids cannot relate with right now. And just as a background, you need to know that even in colonial times, Narok district, which is part of Kilgoris, was a closed district. Closed districts meant, even development-wise, movement-wise, you are not allowed. And it's very strange because the white colonialists, what they were avoiding is animal diseases. So Kilgoris is famous for East Coast fever and those bad livestock diseases, and Narok as well. So what the Mzungu did was close it off. No movement of people and animals out of that district. And you know what else it does? It closes you away from development. No schools, no roads, no development basically. So I've actually watched almost in my adulthood now those places opening up. Kilgoris becoming the farmland it is today. It wasn't when I was a child. It was a dangerous place. I'm sure some of these stories about animals and teachers sound fictitious, but they happened. We used to really pity non-Maasais who are coming to the area because they don't know how it works, and they don't know the paths to avoid. We had sad stories. There was a sad story of, I remember one old man was actually killed by an elephant because he didn't know you have to follow the wind direction in relation to where the elephants are. If the elephants on the path ahead, make sure you check what direction is the wind so that your scent doesn't reach them. If your scent is away, your body scent is away from these animals, then you are likely to be safe. Also, there are designated paths, which of course you can't see because it's just the bush, but we, the locals, knew. And this Mzee, unfortunately, who came from Kericho side, followed a wrong path, he was killed. Another gentleman from Luyaland came and he set up a snare for antelopes. And one day it caught a leopard. So the snare caught a leopard. And now when a snare catches a leopard, it's something dangerous. So this gentleman approached the animal the same way you'd approach an antelope. So he went with his panga and cut the leopard. You know what he cut? He cut the snare. So the string was cut, meaning the leopard was free. What else followed?
It was threatened.
The leopard attacked him and it removed his the skin on top of the scalp, pulled it backwards. Again, it didn't die, so it ended well. But it became a source of humor for the locals, like, how did you do that? You don't approach a wild animal with a panga. You use a spear so that it's a distant. So spear it until it dies before you approach it with a panga. And the joke was the leopard opened his head and asked him, una akili mzuri kweli kutumia panga. So I grew up in a humorous village. Dangerous. There were lives lost, but there was a lot of humor as well around the interaction of human and wildlife. So when we talk of human-wildlife conflicts, I see all these stories that we do. We grew up in that. We knew exactly how it used to happen.
When I was listening to your story, I was thinking, does that shape your survival instincts as a human being?
It does. It's the boyhood was totally different. You carry scars, you carry experiences of what it is to live in dangerous places. You develop better instincts. So I always say rural is better than urban in terms of shaping your instincts. Your environmental awareness is much, much better than that of an urban kid.
At your Thanksgiving party, we saw Chief Justice, who was your chief guest, CEOs, MDs. I mean, how do you build such a huge network?
It comes with time because I've served for now over 26 years in media. So you build this over time. You get to know people. In the course of your duties as a journalist, you interact with a lot of people. And what I always say about journalism, it's a privilege to serve public interest, and in the process, the additional privilege of knowing the different players in that space called public interest. And that is why you get to build a wide network of people from different sectors. Some become your friends, some become your, just people that you interact in the course of duty. So it comes with time. And when the chemistry is right, sometimes some of your own news sources become people that become friends that you can sit with, like we did here, to celebrate a moment like we had last week. You know.
And LK, journalism has provided you with a front seat to witness historic events in your career, from presidential transition, war in Congo, regional politics. Looking back, what was that moment that has stuck with you?
Meeting Nelson Mandela. That was spiritual. That was overwhelming. It was just breathtaking. Because, again, as a child, following the news, as I described, on radio and newspapers. On newspapers, for example, I used to like going to a page called Around Africa. And in Around Africa, you'll see a lot of news from apartheid South Africa. You will read about the attack of the ANC, African National Congress, headquarters in Lusaka. You will read about the assassination of Samora Machel, the president of Mozambique. He was coming from a frontline states meeting in Lusaka. I think it was on the 19th of October, 1986. And as he was going back to Mozambique, his plane crashed on the boundary of South Africa and Mozambique. It was clearly brought down by, it's suspected to date, by the South African apartheid regime, because Samora Machel was a strong person in fighting apartheid South Africa. So I'll read this news, and down there it will always tell you Nelson Mandela, who was imprisoned way back in 1964, was still in prison in Robben Island. So he became this hero, and he was a hero that we all wished well, but meeting him was never even in the outer margins of my dreams. But then I work for KTN, where my first job as a journalist, employed journalist, was as a reporter. And I worked for 2 years, in the course of which I win the CNN Africa Journalist of the Year award. And this gives me the opportunity to go to South Africa. And that was the first dream that, so South Africa, the country I used to read about in newspapers and listen to on radio, will become my first foreign trip outside Kenya. And I was going there to collect my CNN Africa Journalist, as a finalist of the CNN Africa Journalist of the Year in 1998, March. So I would land there, and then it goes very well. This is dreamland. A young journalist, I'm only just 2 years into the career, and I'm already winning continental awards. So I win this. And then the next year again, I am a finalist in the CNN Africa Journalist of the Year for my coverage of the Karura story. Karura was grabbed by elements in the KANU administration, and I reported this after investigating the destruction of a section of the forest. So I win again. So after winning the second award, I'm offered a job at the South African Broadcasting Corporation during the awards. You know, after you collect it and, the managing director of the SABC tells me, we would like you to work for SABC. The offer was made now a second time, because it was made the first time I won, and then the second time in 99 I was offered again. And I told my boss, Isaiah Kabira, who had stopped me the first time and said, no, garner more experience, because you're so young, these things are just happening, just concentrate first. I listened to him, and that gave me one more year in KTN. Now, the second time, May 1999, when I win and I was offered, I told him they have offered me the job again. What do you think? I said, it's okay. We never know, whether the chance can come again. So in 99, I leave to South Africa. And I'm received well at the South African Broadcasting Corporation. And because I'm Kenyan and an East African, I was assigned the regional story of Burundi peace process. South Africa at the time was mediating the end of the civil war in Burundi. And the mediator was Nelson Mandela. So Nelson Mandela, who had just retired, I think, yes, he had just retired as president, but very revered, now becomes the mediator of the Burundi peace process. And I'm assigned the story. I was as my first story in SABC. And what this entailed was to travel with Nelson Mandela to the assignment of the peace process. The talks were convened in Arusha, Tanzania. And so I was assigned as the reporter to accompany Nelson Mandela to cover this story. So that is the first time I met Nelson Mandela. And how this happened was we were told to go to, we were sent to where the presidential jet carrying Nelson Mandela will take off from. And this is the Waterkloof Air Force Base in Pretoria. Waterkloof is the equivalent of the Kenya Air Force headquarters in Kenya. Maybe in, I know it's Nanyuki, but in this case, Eastleigh Air Base, which is in the capital. So we go there and wait for Nelson Mandela to come. And we are ushered into the waiting area. And then, as protocol demands, we have to get into the plane before Nelson Mandela. So the cameraman, reporter, and his team, it is a presidential jet. So we board, and Nelson Mandela comes in. And then I am summoned from the regular seats and told to join Nelson Mandela in the presidential cabin. My body was reacting differently. I'm sweating, because I've only read about Nelson Mandela. The fact that I was just going to be in the same plane, it doesn't matter where I was going to sit, for me was already overwhelming. But then here is Zelda Lagrange. Zelda Lagrange was the personal assistant of Nelson Mandela. Very brilliant white Africana lady, and I found that to be quite an oxymoron, considering that these are the people who imprisoned him for 27 years. And the personal assistant is very Africana, a very nice lady called Zelda Lagrange. So she comes in. She is the overall manager of the Nelson Mandela schedule. She comes in and calls me, Linus, come in. And I'm taken to the cubicle of Nelson Mandela. And there were only 4 of us in that cubicle. And I sat the way we sit this way now. Nelson Mandela right across me, and myself here. To my right was Zelda Lagrange, and to Mandela's right was Professor Garvey, another Afrikaner professor of the Cape Town University, who was Mandela's advisor. So 4 of us in this entire cubicle. And Mandela said, young man, how are you? And I said, I'm very well, thank you, Your Excellency. What is your name? And I tell him my name. Where are you from? And I'm trying to imitate his voice because that's how he used to speak. And I tell him I'm from Kenya. And he asked my story. And I mentioned about winning the CNN Africa Journalist of the Year award and said, hey, you're a good journalist. Did Daniel Arap Moi put you in jail for that? I told him the Karura story. And he asked whether I had been detained for it. Because those were the times that some of those stories can end you up in detention. I told him, no, I was never detained. I just told the story and I won the award. So we flew with Nelson Mandela from Pretoria, Waterkloof Air Force Base, to the Kilimanjaro International Airport in Arusha. Same cabin, and it was something overwhelming. I wasn't reacting properly. I was trying to remain confident and ask him stories. And he was a very good storyteller. There's something else I witnessed. And there's a book called Conversations with Myself, written by Mandela. I saw him actually writing his notes that day. He was using foolscaps. He'd pick a foolscap and write, his recollections and drop them. Zelda Lagrange will collect them and compile them. Those are the notes that ended up being part of the collections called Conversations with Myself, the last book written by Nelson Mandela. I was so privileged to have been part of that. Now, this became normal because of how long the Burundi peace process took. It took a very long time. Because from there, from Arusha, we again had a trip to Burundi itself, where Nelson Mandela now visited the ground to see how Burundi is. And we were in the same plane, same convoy, same everything. It became normal to see Nelson Mandela at close range. And we traveled from Dar es Salaam to Bujumbura. And then from Bujumbura, we went by road. The Mandela convoy traveled by road from Bujumbura to a town called Gitega, which is in central of Burundi. It's now also the administrative capital of Burundi. So seeing him this close, I must tell you, Anne, was quite overwhelming. That, oh, this is Nelson Mandela. I took a photo with him, and he didn't want any photos taken during... Oh, Zelda was a very strong manager. She didn't want any photos taken on board the plane. I wish they were taken because I was sitting face to face with him. But I'm privileged to have had what I would call more than my share of time with that legend called Nelson Mandela. It also opened my way to interacting with the higher echelons of South African administration, because I was assigned most of the presidential duties. After Mandela retired from the Burundi peace process, it was handed over to Jacob Zuma, who became the new mediator. Jacob Zuma at the time was the deputy of President Thabo Mbeki. And so, again, I made all these travels with Jacob Zuma, and we became very good friends with Jacob Zuma, who was deputy president and later became president. Thabo Mbeki, the president, I got to interact a lot with him because I covered the story of the transition of the Organization of African Union, OAU, to become the current AU. The first meeting was held in Togo, Lome, and I was the reporter there with the South African Broadcasting Corporation. Then from there we moved on to Ivory Coast. There was another AU meeting. Another time we moved to Cairo, Egypt. We covered another preparatory meeting. And then eventually we ended up in Addis Ababa. And this across like a period of about 2-3 years, covering the AU story, transition from OAU to AU. I covered that story from beginning to end as a reporter with the South African Broadcasting Corporation. I was present in those rooms. I was present watching as bodyguards of President Muammar Gaddafi of Libya fighting with bodyguards of President Hosni Mubarak of Egypt, you know, because the Egyptians who are hosting the meeting wanted it a certain way. And, you know, some of these backroom stories that we don't see on air is those power games between bodyguards of this president and bodyguards of that president. And you'd see it in AU meetings, you'd see it in Addis, because there's this competition to control the space. I also witnessed a fight between bodyguards of President Yoweri Museveni and bodyguards of President Bill Clinton when Clinton visited Entebbe. I was present in the room. Even bodyguards of security services of President Benjamin Mkapa at the time and President Bill Clinton when he was in Arusha for an African summit, again on the Burundi peace process. I witnessed all this, and all this is not just history but a privilege to be on what you're describing correctly there and as a front seat. So I've seen quite a number of those interesting events.
And how did that shape the man you are today?
First, you have to always remember that you are just a messenger. You're a witness, record accurately, and relay accurately. So it's also humbling. You have to remain humble. You are getting a privilege that very few get. When you're traveling with a president, when you are called into spaces of privilege, you have to build that trust. And I'll illustrate this with a story of President Thabo Mbeki. When President Thabo Mbeki retired, while he was removed from office and was now doing other things, he was sent here to Kenya as part of the observers of the 2017 elections. And the aftermath, that was very difficult. Remember, we had tear gas Monday and Thursdays. You remember the Maandamanos. And when he came here for a fact-finding mission, President Thabo Mbeki retired through the South African embassy, looked for me. And I was called on a Sunday. I remember, because I'd just finished church, and I was told by an officer of the South African embassy that the president is in the country and would like to see you. At the time, the Intercontinental Hotel was still operational. And so I quickly, on a Sunday, dressed up in a suit to go to meet President Thabo Mbeki. So this lady from the embassy tells me, we are meeting at the Intercontinental, 3 p.m. without fail. You saw what time I came out of church today was around 1:30. So that was quite a short time. So I prepared. It was a very rainy day. So I left, drove off to go and meet Thabo Mbeki. And I reached T-Mall down in near West, Nairobi West, you know, T-Mall. And I think there was an accident ahead. So there was a lot of traffic. So I said, I'm going to really be late for this. And the lady is calling, how far are you? How far are you? How far are you? And I tell her, I'm on the way, I'm on the way, I'm on the way. Now, where I'd reached, it was impossible to move. So I thought very quickly, park at this petrol station, a Shell just nearby, near Strathmore. I took my car there, called for the manager and requested him, please, niwekee hii gari, leave it here. And because this traffic, I can't go through. I think there was either a march or something. There was something terribly wrong around the Nyayo Stadium area. Traffic was not moving. So I requested this manager at this Shell petrol station, can you keep the car for me? I need a motorbike. I'd never taken a ride. And I'm in a suit.
That was the first time? On a two-wheel?
On a two-wheel in town? That way, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I've taken a two-wheel elsewhere, but not on assignment like that. I'm in a suit. Okay. So what I requested for is, first of all, there is a bit of recognition. People would tell who it is. So I requested for a helmet. I took a helmet, and I also took a flak jacket around the suit because it was rainy. And I took a motorbike. This gentleman did his best. He drove, is it riding? So dangerously. So we are going between cars. And I'm tall, so I'm thinking my knees will hit the cars as I was being. But I encouraged him to really do what he can to get me to the Intercontinental very quickly. So I was delivered in Intercontinental on a motorbike. We stopped on the side. I shed off the helmet, shed off the jacket. It was a reflector jacket. Gave it to the gentleman, paid for the ride, and went in quickly to the washroom to just make sure I'm in good order. And the lady ushered me to meet President Thabo Mbeki. I'm giving you this story as an illustration of what time and managing those interactions can mean. So we go into the meeting, all alone, President Thabo Mbeki and myself at the Intercontinental, and he wanted to get a briefing on the state of the nation. Nothing else. So he asked me about the political situation, the security situation. What do you think? What is happening? What have you seen? How do we... All these things. And I felt this is really a moment I should be humble about, that he chose to ask me about these things. When President who had replaced him, Jacob Zuma, also came, I also had a similar moment, just to sit with the president and discuss the issues that he would like to know. Normally it's about the region, it's about the nation, it's about the dynamics. And they want this for nothing more than just being briefed about that. I've also had those moments with some high-ranking high commissioners and ambassadors here in Nairobi. I've had meetings where you'll go and just be requested to have a chat about the state of the country, the state of the political situation. And when I sit in those meetings, I consider that the credit you get for building experience, and also you have to build trust, because you have to be trusted by these people. You also have to build knowledge of that environment, because they want to be informed. So you had better be well informed yourself before sitting in those very well informed situations.
And do you feel the weight when you're presenting all this actionable information?
Yes, you feel the weight in many different ways. First of all, these in most cases are foreign entities. It's a foreign government, and this is your country. So you also manage how much you say. Two, you feel the weight of, why me? How many others do you talk to get to the conclusion of the information you're looking for? And so you feel the weight of preparing well. Make sure you are well versed. Make sure you're not over speaking. Make sure you're not exaggerating. Give only what is true, and give only what is useful for that particular person, whether it's a head of state, a high commissioner, or an ambassador.
What's your favorite meme?
Which one is my favorite? There are so many favorites. To entertain myself, I like Trump memes. They're the best. And, you know, there's something that I like about him. I think Trump is a genuine person. I've followed his story for a very long time. And when you see him talking, there's consistency. And I like that bit about him, that he's consistent. What he was saying in the 80s, from the time he started saying the country is being led by stupid people, to the time he's now become president and undoing some of those things that he thought are stupid, that is consistency. It doesn't matter when a person is doing the right thing or the wrong thing. The first thing is in my view, is, are they genuine? And when it comes to Trump, politically, you find that he's the man he was in the 80s. He's still the one saying those things that he said in the 80s, and now as president he's doing them. He's also a very good communicator, in my view. He communicates really well. He's rough. He's rough and raw. And in the process, it becomes one great source of entertainment. Look at the lookalikes that have come up. Look at the memes. Whether you want to make fun of your wife, you'll get something from Trump. Whether you want to make fun of politicians, you'll get something from Trump. So Trump memes for me are the number one. Locally, do you want to know locally? There's Sonko, there's Gachagua, there's the president, William Ruto. All these are great content creators.
And the current deputy president is actually doing so well with the memes.
He's the latest. He's the latest in the market of content. And I think he'll serve it for the remainder of the year as the number one content meme producer. Yeah.
What should you expect from you in the next 10 years?
I don't know. I'll keep working hard. I'll keep pursuing my dreams. I've been lucky to tick off a number of destiny boxes, including now my admission to the bar as an advocate of the High Court. You see, I believe in God, and I believe a man's story is tied to God's wishes. And the script is run from there. I'm merely an actor in a script that is predestined by God. Yeah.
What's that one thing that keeps you awake?
I passionately believe in public interest. And my career as a journalist and my study of law just put more pressure on the need to serve greater public interest. And a lot of countries have done better than us. I really feel that Kenya is made up of very, very good people. Kenya is a place of many good possibilities. But it frustrates me to watch how we fall short. We come so close, yet fall short because of many things that are around the leadership question. We're a bit like a good football team that has poor finishing. You know, there's good ball possession. If our people are the best in IT around the region, they are fixing IT in Rwanda. If our people, Kenyans, are the best in the hotel industry, they are working in Uganda, working in Tanzania, working in Rwanda, leading in those spaces. If our country is producing the best scientists, if our country is producing the best teachers that are marketed all around the world, if our country is the best in producing serving the hospitality industry, even in the Arab world, whether you're talking of the UAE, Dubai, Doha, and all these places, why can't we convert this to a greater success story back home? So I burn with that we can do better as a country. We are way, way, way better than this. And whether it's through my kicker or an occasional tweet here, you can sense my frustration with some of these things that don't work. And they don't work for the simple reason that sometimes people in leadership positions are not genuine. They are not out there for those greater causes. They're out there for jobs. They're out there for a salary. They're out there for wealth. They're out there for fame. They're not out there for fixing these things. So I get frustrated because I know Kenya is capable of a lot more better. And this is just from the totality of my observations as a journalist. I've traveled wide enough. I've covered many stories. I've seen the potential of other countries compared to ours. And it's a bit like having a great team that is constantly on the bottom of the table for no good reason. And that is a sad story of Kenya. I wish to see some of these things fixed, whether at the national level, county level, all some of these places. And I know you might think this is political talk. It's not. This is common sense. We are a good country. We are made up of good people. The quality of our human resources, the quality of our education must translate to better. And I think it's down to how leadership attends to this. And that's why you see constantly in our journalism, we try to pile the pressure in the right place. Besides reporting, you also have to have a bit of an opinion to press leadership in the right direction, because we are capable of a lot better as a country.